Welcome to the Top Texas Lawyers Podcast. This podcast is brought to you by the law firm Abercrombie & Sanchez, PLLC. You can find us on the internet at astxlegal.com or by calling 1-888-981-7509. Your hosts are Bryan Abercrombie and Samuel Sanchez. Bryan has been practicing law for 18 years and is board certified by the Texas Board of Legal Specialization in the area of family law. Sam has been practicing for 13 years, is licensed in both Texas and Florida, and is a certified mediator. This podcast is for informational purposes only, and all views are the opinion of the hosts. It's not designed to provide legal advice for your particular legal matter, and it should not replace the advice of competent counsel. Welcome, and we hope you enjoy the Top Texas Lawyers Podcast.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Top Texas Lawyers Podcast. I am Bryan Abercrombie, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Sam Sanchez. Sam, how you doing?
Doing well, brother. Doing well. Basically, the crayons to your paper.
The chocolate milk to my Oreo cookies, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, there you go.
Or just regular
to your
milk.
donut.
Or just regular milk. I don't know. The
Almond
A1
milk,
steak
whatever it is you're drinking nowadays.
A1 steak sauce to my T-bone. No,
dude, this is Texas. We don't put A1 steak sauce on steak.
That's true. That is true. We don't put Heinz 57 either.
That's right. No ketchup. It's just pure spice, baby.
Well, I am sporting the Vandy hat, even though I didn't go to Vanderbilt. Got those boys in the College World Series. Big win last night. And we were in Nashville last week, so we missed our episode last week because the boy was playing baseball in Nashville. So I got to do the little tour.
He's gonna be playing for Vandy pretty soon, before you know it.
Yes, if he's going to be playing for them, he's going to have to be playing on scholarship because it's a pricey institution.
Some dollars.
Some cheddar to go down.
For sure.
Yes, it sure is. But no, Nashville, great city. Everything was awesome, and it's always good to be able to spend time with kiddos and all that. Of course, that last weekend was Father's Day, so happy Father's Day to you, Sam.
Ditto, belated, happy.
Yes. So anyway, we are going to talk a little bit about mediation today. So, Sam, what do we do on mediation? I mean, let's kind of tell them what the firm's doing these days on mediation.
Sure. We actually offer that service to both parties with attorneys and parties without attorneys. So if you're what's called pro se, meaning you're representing yourself, we'll do mediation for you as well. It's a really important topic. It's something we've kind of touched on in different, podcast episodes. We've been dealing with all kinds of law, but it's a very powerful tool as far as helping to resolve matters and getting some very creative solutions that a court really can't do.
Right. That's the big key right there is solutions that a court can't do. And it also, keeps down the animosity between, anytime you go into court, you got to put your suit of armor on and you got to get ready to do battle. Mediation, keeps that from happening because animosity coming out of a courtroom after you've done battle, especially for two parents, is typically, really, really can be really acrimonious for a long period of time. And
for sure.
Mediation helps. It number one makes you a part of the solution, so you're less likely to end up back in court. And two, it keeps you from saying things you regret, I guess, so to speak. They say that for every hour that you spend in court, it sets the relationship between dad and mom or back a year. Just in general terms.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Yeah, and obviously, I know, well, before we get too far into that topic, I just want to touch on the in the news for a minute.
Yes.
Obviously, yeah, we know our corner, our news corner. I just wanted to kind of pick your brain a little bit about Brittany, our favorite, we're kind of fangirl in Brittany.
Free Brittany was trending on Twitter recently.
Hey man, she testified finally in open court about, the conservatorship. We've done a podcast a little bit about that and, how it can be affected.
Her money back. She hasn't had her money for a long period of time.
Man, that is
Gives
some
that money
crazy
back.
conservatorship stuff when you can talk about like she can't even remove her IUD without the court's
Right.
permission, or the person who's managing her conservatorship issues to approve that. So
Right.
you
As
know,
I understand it, she wanted to change the person who was doing the guardian of the person, right?
yep. Yeah, she wants to change that. She wants to hire her own lawyer. Imagine that, not being able to hire her own lawyer. I mean, it's just
Right.
like, it's something that we've touched on, obviously, guardianship, but I would tell you like mediation to kind of tie these two subjects together so you can understand how it can be used. So these parties could absolutely go to mediation. A court can order parties from any aspect of law to attend mediation, and they can agree to do it. So if you're looking at it and saying like, okay, well, I'm contemplating a case, can I go to mediation in advance of filing the case? Yes. Can you, what's that agreement like? Well, it's still binding as a contract. When you do it within a case, obviously mediation, the advantage to like Brittany in her situation would be if they were able to reach an agreement, then it's binding and irrevocable, right? That's another big piece of what we'll talk about here in a little bit. But
Yeah. I
yeah,
mean, then mediations can be done in guardianships. They can even be done on appeal. In a
that's
case
right.
that's on appeal, a lot of times they'll order it back to mediation to see if they can settle, something that the appellate court, is going to have to rule on.
Yeah, and even narrowing issues, like in Brittany's case, if they wanted to go in and say, well, okay, we'll agree to let you, of the 10 things you want, 8 of them will agree to, then really you only go into the judge on very narrow, limited issues, which a lot of times can help both parties. So you're not risking
Right.
everything when you
I
do
mean,
that.
I've gone to mediation on cases where we settled everything but the amount of child support. So this was a non-acrimonious thing where we went to court and we presented our numbers, they presented their numbers, and the judge made a determination. And it wasn't a he said she said. It didn't turn out to be a, a big gladiator fight, and it really, I think, helped the parties out in the end, because they're not fighting for every single sliver of furniture or whatever else. But
Sure,
yeah, that
absolutely.
Britney Spears, that's a great point, because this is it's an ongoing and hot topic.
Yeah, I mean, I feel for any family in that situation, but obviously, such a high profile person has become just obviously a huge litmus test for conservatorship in California. But really, I think it's going to have nationwide applications because, now I think courts realize that you just never know who's in front of you and how that turns out. And any story can be picked up by the press and really kind of taken and put, shown a light on it. And when you look at a lot of the things, obviously, I know we talked a little bit about the Britney documentary, but the things that they talked about in there were, you kind of look at that and go, well, that's just a little disturbing, the type of
Right.
control that can be taken from you. So,
Right. I mean, and like you can't even make the basic. I mean, theoretically, she couldn't take an aspirin without this guardian's approval.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, they can say like, if you fail to take your medication, then we'll have you committed again for treatment. I mean, there's a lot of power in those positions and that process. And so I just wanted to kind of touch on that because I know it was a follow up from previous conversations. And
No, it's definitely relatable for sure. So
but
no,
so
so
back to
this back to mediations, though,
yeah.
more exciting stuff of mediations, right? No, but mediation. Let's talk a little bit about a pro se mediation. You've done a number of pro se mediations. Let's talk about your experience with that.
Sure. Well, obviously, I'm a certified mediator. I've been a certified mediator for a long time. And I would tell you that, the challenge about, pro ses is that, and mediation really in general, is that those two individuals are not lawyers, right?
For
The
our
advantage that,
non-lawyer friends, what does pro se mean?
so pro se, you're not represented by counsel when you go into this process. And so if you don't have counsel representing you, that means you have nobody who's really educated about the law to advise you about the law as you enter in an agreement. And that can make it very challenging for the parties and for the mediator, right? Because the mediator, who's going to kind of be the go-between to help these two parties reach an agreement, that person does know the law. Typically, mediators are going to be attorneys. Sometimes they're certified mediators. Sometimes they're former judges, depending on the needs of that case, who you bring in to be able to address those concerns. But what you got to understand is, like, if you have a person who's, a layman about legal terms or about statutes or about presumptions, then you have to be very careful as a mediator about the information that you convey, because you can't give people legal advice because you're not representing them. You're just trying to help them reach an agreement. And so a lot of that really is going to require pre-work on the part of the individuals, right? So, many times, like in our process, we'll send out very detailed forms that really kind of give somebody who's not a lawyer an opportunity in their own words to lay out their case and say, this is what I want and why I want it. And the advantage as a mediator is that when you get that information, you can kind of sit down and piece together the puzzle in advance of conversations. You can see both parties, their sides, their reasoning, and what you're doing is basically you're looking for the middle ground, right? You're looking for what we call the settlement delta. Right? That settlement delta is the part of, everybody's on this side of the triangle, and you're
The
trying to
zone
get
of
them.
settlement.
That's right. You're trying to get them inside that triangle on issues. And when you actually spend some time with individuals and you understand their perspective, it's really easy to kind of get people to brass tacks and say, okay, really, we're only sideways about 3 or 4 issues, and let's take them one at a time and see what we can do. A lot of times just doing that really helps people see that they do have a lot in common, because let's just take a family law case. Most parents have, a lot of things in common. They both typically love their children, or they're both typically, if it's just property, highly invested in everything that they've accumulated during the marriage. So knowing that they care about those things, you already have a commonality, right? It's just
Right.
they can't agree on what to give or what to take, what to be able to concede on. And so, that's really kind of where the mediation process.
Or they don't know what the parameters of the law are, and with respect to what the presumptions are under the law. I mean, with family cases comes a presumption. Both parents are presumed to be, in the best interest to be conservators of the children, joint managing conservators. And what does that mean? And, what are the presumptions, and what is what are likely outcomes in court, so you can make an informed agreement on a settlement if you know what the potential outcomes are, good or bad. So if you know what a judge is liable to do, then you can narrow that window of what you should or should not agree on pretty considerably.
Yeah, and I mean, that's something that everybody wants to kind of hear anyways, right? So if you have an attorney, that's what your attorney's doing. It's telling you, hey, look, I've been in front of this judge, I've been in this court, I've dealt with this issue, this is what this judge is typically going to do on that. Well, mediation with parties who don't have that, you really kind of have to, put them both on notice. That says, hey, look, these are the way courts handle these issues. Now, I'm not telling you whether you can get it or not based on your facts. I'm just saying that this is, typically what's going to, come
This is
from
your
a
range of
order.
settlement.
Yeah. And so where do you fall on this issue? Where do you fall on that issue? Well, let's kind of see where we can talk about middle ground and work people towards some type of
Because the term I hear often, especially, is people coming in and talking about full custody. I want full custody. Yeah. Well, does full custody mean time, or does full custody mean rights? Because they're two different things. There's decision making, and then there's time. They're not mutually exclusive, so they're independent. Time can be different from rights.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So,
I mean, that's a great point, Bryan, that you make, because many parents who come in and want to deal with those kind of issues, that's the first thing they say is like, well, I need to be, or let's say they want to say, I want to be primary. I know you've heard that a gazillion times. I need to be the primary parent. And when you boil it down and you ask them, you're like, well, what does that mean to you? Well, I just want to make sure that they have, a lot of time with me. I want to make sure that I'm the person with the most amount of time. I'm like, well, did you know that you could have the majority of the time and not be the primary parent? Do you know what I'm saying? So like there's all kinds of considerations that you're going to spend some time kind of having conversations with. And I feel that that's the most generous part of mediation, because in court, you and I both know, look, courts are like gnats or mosquitoes, right? They're going to give you a very limited amount of time and then they're gone. Well,
if you need a week, if you need a week, you get 3 days. If you need a day, you get 3 hours.
Exactly.
It works.
But in mediation, you can really set out blocks of time to have these types of conversations, to spend time with individuals to get to that, where a court really has to kind of gloss through issues because they have such a finite amount of time because so many people want it. Mediation is your opportunity to really have some in-depth conversations and figure out where people are and what they need and how best to approach it.
So let's talk about maybe the most important element of mediation. We've talked about, why it's important, why you should do it. I mean, it's mandatory down here for all you folks in Harris County and Montgomery County. Mediation is mandatory. So in most of the courts, I don't know of a court that is not mandatory in at this point, and in Fort Bend County for that matter. So you're most likely going to end up at mediation either before temporary orders, after temporary orders. You may end up twice, depending on how contested the case is. So it's a good place to go. So it, like we talked about, it reduces the acrimony. It also allows you an opportunity to come up with creative settlements, reduces resentment and hatred, and also allows you to be creative because you guys know your situation the best, you know your kids the best, that sort of thing. But let's talk about the most important thing about mediation is the cost factor. So cost-wise, the typical, let's talk about the typical contested lawsuit. I mean, what are those liable to run you? I mean, obviously the ballpark is big, but at a minimum, you're talking at least 10 grand on a marginally contested case.
I would say that's a pretty low number too. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I think, especially now with the mandatory disclosures that are happening in most cases, you get into contested cases, you're probably spending $15,000 easy.
Right. So, that's marginally contested. Heavy contested case, it could be $50,000, $100,000 if you have to get experts involved, and even a contested property case, if you have to get business evaluators involved, do forensic accounting, all the different things that go along with separate property prove ups, different things like that. It can cost $100,000 or more. Mediation does cost per side. If you're paying a mediator, you're sometimes paying $1,000, $1,500 a side. I mean, it can be expensive, but cost-wise, you're talking about lawyers' time for a day. If you use a lawyer and go into mediation, you're talking about 1 day's worth of time, and the prep time for it versus prep time and trial and hearings, and you might get reset, you might get continued, you might get additional hearings, all of that stuff. That can run. You're talking about the difference of maybe a quarter of the price or 1/10 of the price. I mean,
yeah, without a doubt, Brian. Without a doubt, that's one of the biggest advantages of mediation. Let's just take a contested hearing. I mean, just one hearing. And most of the time, people are going to spend in excess of $3,000 per side to go to a contested hearing. When you talk about the prep, getting ready, the appearance, the stuff that comes out afterwards, as far as like reviewing orders and having to do that, it's always a substantial savings if you can go to mediation and get stuff done than it is to go to court and have that done.
Right. Right. So 2 sides going to a mediation for a day is probably going to cost, including the mediator, roughly $5,000, maybe $6,000 at the most. A contested hearing between 2 people, minimum is probably $7,000 to $10,000.
Yeah.
So right, and that's not a trial. A trial could be $20,000 per side, or 50 even.
Yeah.
So that's the big benefit, is there's a huge cost savings. And if you're pro se and Sam's helping you mediate your pro se case, you're talking about reducing that number even more. So the amount of money that you're going to pay Sam to try to help you get your case resolved is going to be infinitesimally smaller than hiring 2 lawyers and having them hash it out.
Yeah, without a doubt it is. And the other piece of it is people always ask, like, well, okay, I've always heard that you reach an agreement and somebody doesn't follow it. Like, well, what then? Well, the good thing about reaching an agreement in mediation is it's binding and irrevocable. I mentioned that before. And people hear that and they're like, well, what does that mean exactly? That means there's no crawfishing, right? That means you can't wake up the next day and say, hey, you know what? I decided I don't like any of those terms. I'm just going to do what I want. No, because if you reach a mediated settlement agreement during a case, then each party is entitled to an order based on that agreement. And so that means it's enforceable on its face as it stands right there. I mean, you can go to court and say, I have this agreement. They said they would do this. I want you to make them do it. The court's going to do that. They're going to follow it, because in Texas specifically, mediated settlement agreements are extremely powerful, extremely difficult to set aside. So that's definitely something that I always try to tell people at the onset of a mediation, which is, hey, look, guys, this is a great process. We can be super creative. It's going to be absolutely binding. So you really need to understand what you're signing and signing yourself up for, because once you do, it's in. You're in. They can go all the way.
Right. There's even a Supreme Court case that says mediated settlement agreements can't be overturned by the judge.
Right.
Absent fraud on the mediator, which is never happens.
Yeah. Very, 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 very rare. So yeah, I mean, and that makes it really powerful. And the other piece of it, when we talk about creativity, Brian, I just want to touch on this for a second, is, when we say you can be creative under the law, that's really a very unique term, because the law is very rigid, right? It's governed by statute, it's governed by precedent. And what that means is that judges are confined to a box that's very small. So being creative from the bench a lot of times gets you appealed and overturned. because
Yep.
you have these rules, these parameters in which your decision has to be. And the legislature has carved out a tremendous amount of those in family law. The courts have done the same thing in civil law, probate law. All of these have tremendous amount of restrictions for a judge's ability to do certain things. But when parties go to mediation, they can do all kinds of things so long as it doesn't typically violate, criminal law. So as long as you're not, reaching an agreement to perpetrate a crime, then it's typically going to be enforceable. Well, what does that mean? Let's just take a family law case, right? So you take the example of a court and conservatorship and standard possession schedule, right? So a court is typically going to be bound by that statute, which means one party is going to get more time than the other party. Mediation, you could go in there and we could do an absolutely perfectly custom possession schedule that a court could never create. Fits everybody's life, takes in 100 different types of holidays, takes into account expenses associated with that. A court, it doesn't have time to do that. In mediation, you have the time to do that. So it can be a very powerful tool.
One of the success stories I have from mediation is I had a Muslim parent and a Jewish parent, and they all wanted all the holidays. So we crafted an order in mediation that gave one parent all the Jewish holidays, the other parent the Muslim holidays, and they were able to split time, and everybody was happy as they could be in a divorce. And that's you're absolutely right. You can come to some very clever and creative solutions.
Well, and I would just encourage people who are already involved in that process too. If you haven't talked to your lawyer about the benefits of mediation, it's really a conversation you need to have with your counsel. Is sit down with them and tell them, hey, look, I was listening to this podcast. They were talking about mediation and all these great things that can happen from it. We haven't had that conversation yet. Can we talk about it? Where are we at in our case? Is this something that, is applicable that we could use? Even just to narrow the issue so that you don't have to go to court if that you're still going to have a fight about everything.
So I would also tell you, and that's a great point, leading up to the mediation, obviously it's a conversation you want to have with your lawyer, but what to be prepared for when you go to mediation. You want to have the most up-to-date information you can have on the value of what you have. What that means is the value of your house, the amount of money that's in your retirement account, the amount of money that's in your bank account. Try to get we always do we call it a true up, but we always true up all the accounts the night before mediation so that we're walking in there with the latest and greatest numbers on what everything's worth, what we owe everybody, and so that we can make as an informed decision as possible. You don't want to go in there with a bank statement you had from 6 months ago. What if the account values dropped $5,000 or whatever during that time? You want to have the latest and greatest numbers and be as prepared as possible in terms of what you have, what you owe, and so that way you're making an informed decision when you're settling your case.
I got a crazy dog here. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah. No.
What's going on behind the scenes here? You'd be shocked.
Well, yeah, your point is absolutely spot on, Brian. Having concrete and up-to-date information is critical because a lot of times, let's talk about when mediations break down. What causes them to break down? That, in my opinion, is issue number one. Is somebody comes to the mediation unprepared, so that the other party then feels like I can't trust this agreement because I can't trust the information that's being presented to me. If you're not all on the same page about where you're at and what it is that we're talking about, there's no way to reach an agreement. You're hamstringing your attorney, you're hamstringing the mediator as far as trying to reach it. Doesn't mean you couldn't possibly get there, just gonna make it way more complicated. And the more time you spend in mediation, look, typically mediators are going to charge you, half day, full day, that may be 4 hours or 8 hours, but everybody gets overtime. So if you go beyond the 4 hours, you go beyond the 8 hours, you're paying typically that mediator's hourly rate, and they're getting paid. It's an expensive prospect. So it's always better if you want to come in and have an impactful conversation and maximize your chance of reaching any type of settlement on whatever the issue is. Be 100%. By that I mean, be prepared. Have communicated all the information that you have, or be prepared to communicate that information to the other side so that they can feel comfortable reaching a deal.
So what's the longest mediation you've ever had?
Oh my God, I did 3-day mediation one time. It was 8 hours each time. So that's 24 hours plus of mediating time. And I'll be honest, it wasn't a big estate. It all revolved around kids. But we had dad he had a job that required tremendous amounts of travel worldwide. Mom also had a very difficult position that required a lot of time and attention. And so, the challenge was, how do we sequence, the time for these kids? And both of them were very type A. Let's use type A. And so both of them wanted schedules. The kids were, one was an athlete, one was a musician. They had lessons everywhere from everybody. And, they wanted to know pick up and drop off. Everybody wanted a common calendar. And so, it took a long time. That was a marathon one for sure, but we settled it. So
I have a couple of 2-dayers. One day we spent on property and one day we spent on kids. But the longest single session I had was a great former judge in Dallas did a mediation session with me. You may know her, Frances Harris. She was an excellent judge. We started at 9 o'clock in the morning and we ended at 3 a.m.
Oh my gosh, she did one with me till about 11, and we were all so tired. I was like, oh my god, I couldn't see straight. I could not even imagine 3, brother. That's some
3 a.m. on a Friday night. So you can imagine everybody in my circle was super happy about the Friday night plans that we had to cancel to finish up a mediation. But she did get the case settled. It was a very, very difficult case involving a doctor and a wife. There was prenuptial agreements. There was all kinds of crazy stuff involved in that case. And, it was a marathon. The cost of that case going to trial would have been easily $100,000, probably $120,000 aside. Yeah. So, you're talking about, 13 hours of mediation or 14 hours, whatever it was. And, versus $240,000 at trial,
Yeah. Substantially more money in their pocket walking away than any other way. So really, it's a
so
great.
Sam, So Sam, what do we got upcoming?
Well,
I didn't mean to cut you off. So
no.
Please
Look,
finish your comment.
All I was going to say, it is a great tool. It's a powerful tool. So everybody should consider it if you're going to be involved in any type of dispute. It's really something that's a great way to come to great conclusions. Now, aside from that, we've got some great subjects coming up on our podcast. We'll be talking about the new Texas law, which allows everybody and their dog to carry concealed.
To pack a heater.
Baby, we're Wild West in it. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and things to know if you decide that, hey, you know what, I'm going to participate in that process. And we're going to talk a little bit about things absolutely to keep in mind, both legally and just commonsensically, that will help you kind of navigate those waters. We've got other podcasts that we're going to be talking about. We're going to be dealing with some estate planning. I know that, we get a lot of comments about kind of that process and kind of what to look for. And so COVID has really kind of brought that to light for a lot of people. And they want to know, the information that we can pass along, I guess, so there's a lot of good stuff.
Yeah. And then on the estate planning side, how easy it is to get a will and how much hassle it can save those that are left behind, because the estates we're dealing with right now, and just a couple of clients that we're dealing with, they're so convoluted because no will was left. And so we've got to track down these heirs, and we've got to, they've got all this stuff to do. Whereas that's something that you can do for your family. If you're looking for something to do for your family, that's something you can very easily do for your family and also for yourself, in terms of explaining to everybody what you want and what your wishes are. So yeah, that'll be a good upcoming podcast. We're also going to talk about, how we elect judges in Texas. That's we're coming up on an election year, and people need to know kind of how judges are elected. How do they end up on the ticket, and what those down ballot races actually mean. And that's another topic. And we'll also be talking about what happens when the judge gets it wrong. If you believe the judge gets it wrong, what are your options there? We've handled a number of cases now, going to the Supreme Court and back again. So we'll be talking about those things as well. So we got a lot of exciting stuff coming up here in the next couple of weeks. So we got a summer doing podcasts, Sam.
There you go. Love it.
Maybe we'll do one from the beach or something.
I like it. The lake, we can, like, by the pool at least. I got a blow up pool. Whatever. I can put some water in.
So anyway, well, thanks for the talk today, Sam. I really appreciate you, as always. And we will see you next week.
Yep, absolutely.
And once again, let's give our shout out to our great band who gives us our music.
Yes.
Sam knows them quite well. He's related to one of the members. Let's talk about that.
Absolutely. My son, Crush Bouquet, they're a great up and coming band. Let us use that intro music, which is phenomenal. So look for them on any place you download your music.
And look for them coming up in maybe some venues. Let's hope, right?
Yeah,
maybe
let's
some
hope.
venues in your local areas.
Yeah, if you're in
sometime
the Austin
soon.
area, you might just catch them. So definitely keep an eye out.
And so, Sam, how do they get in contact with you if they need you?
Sure. So if you're trying to reach me directly, best way is probably email. You can reach me at ssanchez@astxlegal.com. You can find us on the website at astxlegal.com. You can reach me directly by cell at 817-914-5470.
Sam serves Dallas and Fort Worth. Well, we really serve basically all of Texas, but Sam's office is in Dallas, or is in the Fort Worth area. My office is in the Houston Woodlands area. I'm reachable at 281-374-4741. Cell phones 214-724-6106. And I'm also at ASTX Legal, and B. Abercrombie at ASTX Legal if you want to reach out to me. We're also on Facebook and Instagram as well, and LinkedIn. And LinkedIn as well. So we're trying to cover our social media bases there. So you can also catch this podcast on YouTube and Rumble, I believe. So if you want to give us a like over there on one of those forums, or whether a like on Facebook, a like on Instagram, like on YouTube, or like on Rumble, we'd be highly appreciative. So
yeah, if there's a topic you want us to kind of touch on, don't hesitate to send that to us too. We'd be happy to we've gotten a couple of those that we'll
yeah, and we'll be talking about some other topics and bringing on some guests here from time to time, because I mean, real estate's becoming a huge topic these days, and we have an idea for bringing on some realtors to talk shop. So we're trying to put that together. So I think we got some exciting stuff in the works.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
All right, buddy. Well, thank you for the time today, and we will see you next week.
All right, see you soon, Jeff.